Final Fantasy VII Remake Revisited Chapter 3, Home Sweet Slum. This week, we take another deep dive into the Revisited series with a look at Chapter 3. In this week's episode, we cover Tifa's introduction, Seventh Heaven's basement, callbacks, sketchy guys in black robes, side quests, what's left on the cutting room floor, Johnny, darts, motion capture, and the Lifestream. With that out of the way, let's mosey. How was Tifa's introduction scene decided on? Was it important to make a strong first impression on the player? We felt it was important to show that Sector 7's slums are Avalanche's home ground and to relieve the tension after the reactor bombing mission by having Tifa and Marlene waiting for everyone to arrive back at 7th Heaven. The thinking was that the situation would highlight Tifa's kindness as a character. She is the only childhood friend that Cloud can open up about his true feelings to, so we made it that you could only see a certain unguarded aspect of his personality when he is interacting with her. Interestingly enough, I don't think the biggest controversy around Tifa was due to her failing to fill that gap as a childhood friend. It was because the majority of outspoken fans wanted her visuals to be true to the original: small white top, red gloves, and bare legs. I'm a big fan of how she looks with the leggings, which fits in its own niche. And the black top underneath her tank top?
Chef's kiss.
Would I be happy either way? Yeah. She's a good-looking character, and changing up the outfit is a good thing, as you can see with the upcoming Ever Crisis. There were some smaller arguments about breast size, but I prefer them to be round versus polygons. Fight me. In the original Final Fantasy VII, you can visit the area underneath 7th Heaven, but this was removed for Final Fantasy VII Remake. Is there a reason for it? In Chapter 3, Cloud is more distant from the Avalanche members than he was in the original game, so we made it that he is not allowed into their underground hideout, having group meetings that only full Avalanche members are invited to, and Cloud being left out in the celebration of the successful bombing mission, etc., depicted the loneliness of his situation. However, there is more to the story, as during development we had actually planned for a section between Chapter 8 and Chapter 9 where the player controlled Tifa and could experience these events leading up to her infiltrating Don Corneo's wife auditions. That section would have featured the inside of the Avalanche base. It was developed to a point where the section was joined up and playable, but we were concerned that having a separate story as an interlude after Cloud falls from Reactor 5 and is reunited with Aerith in the church would damage the tempo of the storytelling, so we ultimately decided to remove that part. I think it would be great to show Tifa's side of the story if we get a chance at some point. It's true that Cloud is able to go down into the basement of 7th Heaven in the original game, and the scene does play out a bit differently in the remake because he doesn't. The scene with Cloud and Tifa discussing the promise doesn't get shown yet at this point, and as Cloud is exiting, they have already lined up the next mission. This doesn't happen in Remake because they are still slamming some additional character development in with Jessie. A nice touch was the scoreboard on the volcano bomb slot machine turning into all 7s to lower the elevator. Why is there a photo of 7th Heaven from the original Final Fantasy VII on the wall in 7th Heaven in Final Fantasy VII Remake? We put it up as an Easter egg for fans of the original game. This is just a fun nod to the original. When you see how close the remake is to the OG version, it makes it feel as if they're doing right by the game in recreating it for a new generation. Can you tell us anything about Marco, in particular his backstory, and how he came to have the number 49 tattooed on him? The Black Clove figures all victims of extreme Mako poisoning and are scattered around the world. Rather than focus on their individual identities, they present the overall image of a mysterious group. Going forward, there will be more Black Cloak characters appearing than in the original, and we'll reveal more details of their predicament. These black-robed figures, all Sephiroth clones, were all over the place in the original game, and most of the time contributed tiny nuggets of information about their lore. It would be great to know how many of them there are actually going to be floating around the world, and if they will appear again in the northern crater searching for the black materia. Was there ever any concern about adding side quests during the main story sections of Final Fantasy VII Remake, and how might these changes affect the overall pacing of the game? We did not have any particular concerns about adding in side quests, however, we did have a clear idea of what their purpose would be from the start. 1. They would not be compulsory for progressing through the game. 2, they would shine a spotlight on the citizens of the slums to dig deeper into the world, and 3, the quest completion status would bring about changes to the costumes in Wall Market. New stories were written for the individual quests, particularly from the perspective of Point 2, and from what I've seen, the fans responded well to them. I'm glad that they dug deeper on all the story content. For instance, the bombing mission alone is less than 30 minutes of run-through in the original game. Here, they almost doubled it. Now, not all the side quests are a hit. Some are simply fetch quests, but it did feel nice to be immersed in the area, knowing what was going to happen later in the game. Building those small emotional connections made the later story developments hit that much harder. As for the cats, this sucks. Were there any quests you originally planned for this chapter that were cut out? If so, why? This is not something that was deleted, but when we were discussing the content for the side quests in the Sector 7 slums, one suggestion was to have a request from one of Hojo's assistants who had been dispatched by Shinra. This idea for a character was adopted into the game and incorporated as part of the overall system, eventually becoming Chadley. Chadley series was one of the most fun side content I've played in a game in recent memory. It's not simply a fetch quest, it's sort of a tutorial that has you get better and better over time, and then offers you challenging content as a reward. I'm very glad they made these additions.
Appreciate the tremendous power of materia, as well as how it might be wielded against your corporate enemies. And if you later decide that I am not worthy of your trust, you can do what you do best.
Why was the decision made to increase the importance Johnny has in the storyline of Final Fantasy VII Remake? Was he originally planned to have a larger role in the original Final Fantasy VII? When making the original Final Fantasy VII, the game designers were free to populate the various towns with NPC characters like Johnny. It just so happens that I created Johnny myself, but the same thing happened with many of the distinctive NPCs such as Shinra Manager and Andrea, giving them more emphasis as sub-characters in the remake. This goes back to question 5. Adding characters that you start to care about is important. Sometimes there are characters you absolutely love and others you hate, and sometimes ones you hate to love. But Johnny constantly getting into trouble was a nice distraction from the looming tragedy that was about to unfold. We love the darts minigame. How did this come to life? Were there any other candidates for minigames that never quite made it into Final Fantasy VII Remake? The darts match was more than just a minigame and also plays a part in the story. In the events before and after the darts match, we needed to have Cloud taken out of the plot to bomb Reactor 5 and create a sense of his isolation from Avalanche. We aimed to have the player experience this firsthand with a playable section where Cloud is off having a lonely time while all the other members of Avalanche are together in their strategy room. In terms of minigames that were rejected, this also relates to the answers to question 2 above, as we did consider having a punching bag on the wall of the underground hideout which Tifa could train with. The darts game was fun and simple. I remember it being a part of the trophy requirements to get platinum by getting the high score of 7 darts or less, but other than that, it wasn't too engaging. The punching bag from the strategy war room was moved to Tifa's room above Marl's place, but you were unable to interact with it. In the scene where Tifa mixes a cocktail, were the motions of her using the shaker captured by a motion actor? What were the challenges here? We started out with various different motions as possible candidates to use in this scene, but discussed it with the actors during the MC recordings and decided to have the animator tweak the performance to bring out Tifa's personality more, and also to have a feeling of realism. We did many retakes, and it would have been tricky to capture flashy motions like throwing the shaker in the air and spinning around before catching it, so we kept it down to just throwing it up in the air. As far as bar tricks go, this was quite simple, but it was still really enjoyable to just relax and have a conversation with Tifa. Her personality shines right through as she criticizes Cloud for not saying something nice to her, forcing their specialty Cosmo Canyon on him. Beautiful.
Beautiful.
Chapter 3 sees the player unlock weapon enhancement. Is it deliberate that the UI for this feature is reminiscent of space and the planet? It is set up this way to show that there is a Lifestream, the energy of the planet, flowing inside your weapons as well, like a whole micro-universe. It also projects a Final Fantasy VII take on the world of particles and molecules, with the microcosm gradually expanding as you improve your weapons and drawing out talent abilities. Speaking of Cosmo Canyon, all I can think of whenever I pull up the weapon enhancement screen is the observatory after Nanaki, aka Red 13's, Grandpa Bugenhagen shows the party his planetarium and talks about the Lifestream, the Cetra, and the Promised Land. All good things I can't wait to see in Final Fantasy VII Rebirth. Links for the previous episodes in the description below. It looks like these interviews are published weekly, so I'll be publishing these videos each week for the next couple of months. Next week, I'm hoping they will discuss Roach and what the plans are for him in Rebirth. I've been playing through the Final Fantasy VII Remake and Final Fantasy VII original title alongside these releases, so if you're interested in checking out those playthroughs, they will be released in parallel. Remember to like, share, and subscribe, and hit the notification bell to be notified when I release new content. As always, thanks for watching.